Hello, everybody. I'm Joe Gettinger with the Office of the Provost, and that previous presentation was awesome. Perhaps a little bit of a lower impact for this one, but it's going to have a big impact for the ones that it relates to. So we are going to talk to you a little bit about an internal to the university process of looking at faculty hiring documentation and documents and data surrounding faculty hiring, and using an AI workflow to review those documents and data to improve the accuracy of those and the timeline it takes to complete the faculty hiring approval process. All right, so we have a lot of faculty at the University of Notre Dame, right? Every single one of those, from a one-course adjunct all the way through a tenure track, endowed, university name chair professor, right, has to go through this faculty hiring workflow that we have. Starts at the department, goes all, depending on the type of appointment, will go from the department to the relevant dean's office, and then from the dean's office, potentially to the office of the provost, to an associate provost, to the president. And so all along the way, it's collecting different documents, different data about the appointment, and different approvals from individuals throughout that. So depending on the type of appointment it is and how many documents are a part of that, that can take quite a bit of time. And when you're looking through dozens or hundreds of different appointments, right, you have to have a certain level of precision to make sure that everything matches for every single one of those, right? And so there are certain things that we start to think, well, we're reviewing documents, we're reviewing data elements. These are things that perhaps we can send through an LLM, right, to start to check some of this. Because when you're looking through so many different data elements and so many different parts of documents, if you miss something along the line and it gets all the way up to the provost office when we're reviewing it, or even past us, then all of a sudden we don't know which appointment start date is actually correct. And, for example, if there was a mismatch, and so we have to send it all the way back to get consistency amongst those data elements, and then it has to go through the approval process again. So as you can see, like an error, even as simple as a data consistency issue, can actually extend the amount of time it takes to hire a faculty member. So when we're talking about things, the documents, some of them are fairly standardized template letters, but other of them might not be, like a CV, a faculty CV. And so when we're talking about the things that, and we're looking at the data for what's causing the most amount of sendbacks, we got started thinking, we talked to the AI enablement team, like there is a role that AI could have in checking these data elements, right? This is not replacing human reviewers because there's a lot of nuance to faculty appointments. Taking a look at what type of faculty it would be, their time status, the different hiring benefit implications, right? We're not replacing human reviewers, but for the ones that, as you're going through all these documents, you want to make sure that the dates all match, the names are spelled consistently, the faculty rank title are all consistent documents. The education is in the CV is also in our data that's pushing to our data systems. These are all things that LLMs excel at, right? So having an easy second check or a preliminary check can help, that we hypothesize could help improve the accuracy rate amongst our data and start to decrease the time to approval for a faculty hire.
So we'll go through a more technical slide later, but at a very high level, how it works is we have our faculty appointment documents uploaded in our OnBase system. There's going to be a button in there for the end user to trigger the workflow, documents, as well as the instructions, which will be the prompt for the AI model. We're going to go to an Amazon S3 bucket. That's going to trigger a workflow in a tool called AnyDen. AnyDen is going to grab the instructions, grab the relevant information for the documents. It's going to send both the instructions and the relevant information to an AI model. The model is going to use the instructions to review the documents and generate a report. It's going to say, based on the instructions, these are the potential issues that we found with the documents. That's going to send that report back to OnBase where someone like Joe can review it.
So we're not going to go into crazy details amongst the workflows and processes about faculty hiring, but essentially you have a checklist, if you will, which is a collection of documents and data surrounding an individual faculty hire, right? That checklist has data that we will be pushing to the relevant data systems if the faculty member's hire is approved. And then they also have the relevant documents and application documents and everything surrounding that faculty. So most likely, so those are going to be file types like PDFs, Word documents, images, things like that. So you have essentially like raw data, like Excel file or something like that, and then documents, right? So we wanted this to be fairly flexible, right? So we wanted there to be a front end prompt. So we attach now a set of prompts to a checklist type. So each checklist has a checklist type. So when you hire faculty, you select that checklist type and it's going to spin off that workflow. Well, now we're associating those prompts with that checklist type. So the prompts that we are going to send through this LLM check is already on every individual checklist, right? And it's at the checklist level that we're going to be running these checks. The prompts are also related to documents. So every time we have, you've got tenure and tenure track with tenure track, associate professor without tenure, assistant, there's so many iterations of types of faculty members at the university, right? We want to make sure that we're able to reuse these pieces that we're building, these prompts we're building. And because the AI space is changing so quickly all the time, goodness gracious, I can't keep up. We wanted to make sure it's editable at the system administration level, right? So rather than having to go through our partners, either on the on-base development team or the AI enablement team to make those changes. So as we're seeing the results come in, we're able to dynamically make those changes. So we talked about the prompts and the checklist level, checklist template level. Now at the individual hiring packet level, we have the ability, it's going to roll out to Rob sometime, so I can see a few of you, in the audience, to generate essentially an AI read. So it's at the checklist level, and we're able to lock it down to specific user groups, to specific steps, milestones on that checklist review timeline. You're able to generate that. At that point, it kicks off a delivery of the documents and underlying data to the LLM workflow. And then after the LLM churns on it and determines that it's returned, each individual response, each individual run is saved on the checklist so that an administrator or a user can go and see, okay, at the first run, here are the results. We can see what changes were made on the checklist, what fixes. Here are the results on the second run for the checklist. So we can start to see if people iterate on it, what changes, what is catching, things along those lines. So I'm going to just give you an example of what it returns. So currently it returns an HTML file, right? So so when you're in the on-base faculty hiring system, it's going to take each one of those prompts, right? Generate the results, combine them all, and then use that to populate an HTML template, if you will, right? So we can see here that right now we have it broken down into all these verification checks. If they pass, they have a preliminary status pass. If there's a potential issue, but the LLM doesn't know for sure, it'll start to pass along there. And then potential issues, right, for inconsistencies, we ask it to start to categorize what it's passing back so that an end user can go in there and see, okay, what are the fatal issues? What are actually incorrect that needs change? And then what are some of the more things that an LLM might think it's an issue? And so just having the human eyes on it, we want it to be available so that if it's an issue, potential issue, you look at it and you say, that might be an issue. I'm going to reach out to someone else to check to see if what we're doing is appropriate, right? And maybe it is, and the LLM will flag it, and maybe it isn't, and you just move it along, right? So we think that this type of return is really helpful and accessible for potential users.
This is the quick technical overview. I have to give a shout out to Rob Wick on the enablement team for making this beautiful N8N workflow, and our on-base developers as well. So as Joe showed, the user is going to click a button in on-base. When that happens, it's going to send the appointment documents to an S3 bucket, as well as the prompts, and then additional data. So we also have some other data from other data sources, like appointment dates or education information. So that also needs to be considered. And so that is going to post to an API. It's going to trigger a webhook that's going to start a process in our tool called N8N. And N8N is going to grab those documents and it's going to put it into a vector database. And vectorization basically takes the text from documents and converts it into numbers based on the meaning of the words. So that's a term you might hear when people talk about AI. It just allows the AI model to search it more quickly and to bring back the most relevant piece of information. We found that when we gave it all the documents at once, it didn't perform very well. So the vector database really helped. We also found that taking the huge prompt with all the instructions and breaking it into sections like Joe talked about, that really helped, because what we do is we send one section at a time. And then as I mentioned, we get the results for just that chunk and then we aggregate it at the end. And so right now it's split out by document type, but technically behind the scenes, it's literally using asterisks to separate different sections. So if we find we want to split it out in different ways in the future, Joe can easily go in there and do however he wants. So we send that information to LLM, we get the results back, and then as Joe mentioned, aggregate them, put them into one report, make it look nice in HTML. We send that back to Amazon S3, and then OnBase does a get to the API to see that the job is complete, and then it's
So again, the goal of this is to improve accuracy, to cut down on those sendbacks when a user further down the chain notices an error, has to then go back for the error correction. When we look at our data over the years, there's definitely a strong correlation between a checklist that is a hiring packet that's sent back and then the amount of time it takes for that to hire, for that workflow to be completed, as opposed to those checklists that aren't sent. So we're really hoping that this will start to catch actual issues earlier, but also start the conversation on some of those harder, more nuanced issues earlier as well, right? To start that conversation between dean's offices and the provost office or the relevant departments. We're also hoping it's going to improve the speed, right? To get the actual hiring approval decisions back faster and to improve the quality of overall hiring documents. Again, this is where LLMs have really excelled, right? But we're kind of building around our knowledge of our people, our professionals who have been working in this space. We're using that as a supplement to that rather than a direct replacement. And so that has, because we're not asking absolutely everything, to drill down into employment law considerations, to drill down into, like to define a time status field or things like that. We're relying on our people to still be doing those, but the LLM to call out saying, this might be a part of this individual checklist. We might want to consider this. We're hoping that that will actually improve the time to hire and decrease the time it takes to get through all the relevant cases. And at the scale of the number of faculty hiring decisions we have each year, that will be meaningful in terms of time savings and cost savings.
That's the end of our time. So thank you.